Where would I go? What would I do if I lived in a world that doesn't include you, like a Caesar in Rome, sacked and alone, all dressed to the nines atop a plastic throne? Where would I go and what would I say? Could there be a song if all the notes were
as well? So there's really two big reasons I wrote this book. And the first one is because, and Jeff kind of alluded to this earlier, but I think that we're just so desperately in need of frank, honest, open, educated conversations about sexuality in general, but female sexuality in particular. We get some sensory overload in our culture about female sexuality, but it's just like this one sliver, right? It's just this one very particular picture of female sexuality, and it's certainly not the whole picture. And I think we really need conversations that look at the big picture and look at all of what sexuality is and why it matters. I think we also need honest conversations about sexual brokenness and what that is and what it looks like and how it impacts us and what a healing, restorative, redemptive journey looks like. I think this is probably true in general, but especially a lot of you are here tonight who are part of or might be connected with or at least familiar with the Christian evangelical subculture, and particularly in the Christian subculture, I think this is really true. I remember one of the first times I taught on sexuality at Lee. Do I have a few former students from Lee? Yes. Jamie, hi. Okay. So I remember, some of you may have heard this story, but one of the first times I taught on sexuality, and I don't know what class this was, but I was introing, we were going to talk about sexuality, and I used the word vagina early in the class, right? And this girl who was sitting in the front row turned around to the person behind her and whispered, but so loud that I could hear her, and she said, "Is she serious?" And I thought it was so funny, because really, like, how do you teach about sexual dysfunction without using, the actual words for sexual organs? But at the same time, I thought it was so sad and so telling, right? That there's so much discomfort for some women about sexuality that they're that uncomfortable even talking about their own bodies. And so I think the need for having frank, honest conversations about female sexuality is so essential. And I wrote this book to do that and also to address some very specific kind of myths that I think abound in our culture. So things like what our culture teaches about sexuality is true, things like sex is a god, or on the other side of that, sex is evil. The myth that sexuality is just about behavior, that it's just what we do, that sexuality equals sex, and that definition is pretty narrow too. That you must experience erotic sexual satisfaction to be fulfilled. That's a big one that we hear in our culture, right? That you cannot be a happy, whole, healthy person if you're not experiencing this very particular kind of satisfaction. That who you are is what you've done or what you've had done to you. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that tonight in the excerpt. That sexuality should not be talked about, right? So is she serious that we're really talking about this? And that's kind of funny, but there's also a lot of shame, so often, so much shame around talking about sexuality. And then finally, that sexuality is about the individual. Or even in a book like mine, thinking about what does it mean to have, to experience a sexual healing or restoration. We think so often, I think, about that in individual terms. And in this book, and tonight, as you hear from Lisa, I really hope that you'll walk away thinking about what it means to be part of restoring other people and being part of a sexually whole community, that it's not about, that in and of itself, sexuality is not about me or you or any of us alone, but it is never about the individual, but about community and about moving other people towards healing and redemption as well. One of the things that I really love about being a therapist is the chance to help people walk out from under the weight of shame and silence. And that's what I really hope to do in this book. It took me a long time to write this book for a lot of reasons. Some of those were, I just kept having more babies, and so they kept getting in the way. But it was also just a really hard book to write. It was a hard book to write and challenging to continuously kind of directly confront some of the myths and confront the way that I have dealt with those in my own life, or ways that I have inadvertently absorbed some of them and really wrestle with that. So, second though, I wrote this book because of so much time walking with people in and through, and Jeff and I certainly talk about this a lot, what it means to walk with people in and through sexual brokenness. And my longing and passion is to help be a light on that journey. So this isn't a book that has 5 steps to sexual wholeness, or a prescription for 1, 2, 3, and you're going to be happy and good and everything will be fine. But at the same time, I hope that within the context of reading the book with other people, with someone else, hopefully, that it can be a companion for you wherever you are in your journey, and a lamp and a hope that there is light. And so tonight I want to read an excerpt from a chapter in my book that is about healing from unwanted sexual experiences. My book is about sexuality in general, and I shared with you some of the myths. The whole book is not about abuse or trauma. But I thought about this evening and really thought, if I have a chance to speak to a bunch of people who may or may not actually read the whole book, because that's how life is, you know, and you're going to buy the book and hopefully you'll go home and read it and, you know, your life will be changed forever. But if that doesn't happen, and I just have to heal from loss, it's important to allow yourself to name and grieve those losses. By telling your story, you tell the truth about what happened to your body, your mind, yourself. Second, identify the impact. As you tell your story, the unique impact those experiences have had on your own self-image, thoughts, feelings, behaviors will become more clear. Perhaps, as you tell your story, you realize you labeled yourself a particular way after the abuse, saying things to yourself such as, maybe I'm a slut. That label, coupled with your experiences, may have impacted the choices that you made as you got older. You may begin to notice patterns in thoughts, behaviors, relationships that developed, harmful ways in which your experience has impacted the way you interact in intimate relationships may become more clear, or difficulties in sexual functioning may become more salient as you begin telling your story and looking at the impact. It can feel pretty overwhelming to do this, to identify the impact, but we have hope that our past does not define us. But we cannot begin to heal if we don't assess the damage. Pretending everything is fine does not actually mean that everything is fine. Telling the truth allows us to present our broken selves to God and ask God to be present with us in our brokenness and clearly show us the path to healing and restoration. By identifying the impact, we specifically look at how abuse has affected our identity, our sexual behavior, our bodies, and our minds. And then finally, rewrite your story. And this is true for any of us, regardless of whether we're talking about sexual trauma or other kinds. I think this is what a lot of us who work as therapists feel passionate about doing. Ultimately, healing is about rewriting your story. This happened to you. It was wrong. It should never have happened. But you don't have to live in it now. You can learn new ways of relating, thinking, feeling, behaving. You can learn when and how to trust. You can learn to give and receive touch. You can learn to identify triggers, practice relaxation, speak truth to yourself. Rewriting your story means telling the truth to yourself, that who you are is not what happened to you. Rather, who you are is who you are becoming in Christ. Telling yourself these truths over and over again will help you continue to rewrite your story in the present day instead of allowing the past to control your pen. The sexual abuse or unwanted experiences that you may have gone through cannot be erased, and pretending they did not happen does not facilitate healing, but they don't have to define your future. The God who created us as sexual beings also, as we're told in Psalm 147, heals the brokenhearted, binds up their wounds. I believe we have a God who sees us, who sees our pain, who grieves with us, healing us with his own wounds and walking with us into the light. And I'm really honored tonight not only to have a couple of speakers, well, I'm counting Jeff as a speaker, but having Lisa, and but also having some dear musician friends who write the kind of music and sing the kind of music that does this. It speaks truth and it speaks light into darkness. And so you guys got to hear Eric Peters, who Jeff and I love, and you should go and buy all of the CDs before you leave, and they're right there for sale. How much are they? They're $10, such a bargain. Or you can get them on iTunes. So you can do either of those. But also, I'm going to ask a dear friend of mine, whose name is Charity Muse, to come up, and she's going to do a song for you. That's a worship song. Some of you might know. If you want to sing along, you can. But I remember Charity was a student of mine at Lee for the first time in 2006, and has transformed from being a student to such a good friend. Charity has led worship for me at a number of retreats and seminars, and I've had the privilege of being able to walk with Charity through a lot of pain in her own journey and her own history, and stand with her in moments of hurt and also in moments of joy. And she's going to do a song tonight that, especially the first time I heard her sing it, was so powerful, because the words are about singing about God, that God dances over you while you're unaware that he dances over you. And knowing her story, and knowing my own story, and the stories of so many folks in this room, it was just such a beautiful thing. And so